So, Farah, do you think we can start?
Absolutely. So thank you all for joining. My name's Farah. I'm an 11D and I run the alumni organization, normally based out of New York. Currently, I'm in Virginia. I ran away from the city. First and foremost, welcome to this webinar. We are definitely trying to get more virtual events going so that we can keep the alumni INSEAD, spirit and community well connected. Before we dive into today's webinar, I just want to highlight one initiative that we are starting in New York. We are starting to gauge interest in creating an angel investment group in New York. If you are interested in getting involved in such a group in any capacity, please let me know. Or you can reach out to insead.ny@gmail.com. If you have any friends who are also interested in such a thing, please have them reach out. So for today, welcome Joe. Joe is not only an alum from 92D, but is also a lecturer who handles many different classes both at INSEAD and for alumni. Today's topic is definitely geared towards entrepreneurs and business owners, but we know that we have many aspirational people there who hopefully in the future will have their business. So welcome Joe. I'm sure we're going to learn a lot. We will record today's session, so people who couldn't join will be able to hear it later. And in the comment section or the chat on the right-hand side, if you ever want to type in some questions that you have, we will be making a couple of stops along the way and then have some time for Q&A at the end as well. So take it away, Joe.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure for my first virtual webinar with the Alumni Association New York, but also inviting all the other associations in the US. So thank you for being here. What I would like first to, a couple of logistics. If you don't mind putting your full name, like first name and last name, so we can kind of identify you. This session will be very interactive, so I'm expecting you to engage and ask questions. If you want to turn on your video, feel free to do so. You can switch on and off. That's not, a big problem, but just signal that you're still alive and present. It's always encouraging to see an interactive audience. My presentation will be in, 3 sections. The first one will talk a little bit about, the crisis and why the situation is, unique or unusual for most of us. Then, of course, we'll be talking about effectuation. I'll be presenting to you the principles of effectuation. And the third part would be, my recommendation, the recipe, how you prepare really for the rebound. I will take those 2 pauses for questions and answers. So if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. You can re-ask your question live. We do have time for that as well. But prepare your question, ask them, and I will try as much as I can to respond. I will be sharing my screen, so let's start first with, okay. Can you all see my screen? I'm assuming yes. Okay, so let's first try to understand what is the effect of that crisis? What is that crisis about? In fact, like most crises, initially, when things happen in a sudden, we are kind of stressed because we have no clue what's going to happen, what to expect. And then the stress level goes a little bit down because we can start to understand what's going on. And then it goes a little bit, further down because, we know that, what we can, sorry. We know how much we don't know about it, but we kind of calm down because it's not like the surprise effect anymore. And then we start to understand what we need to do, but the level of stress will go up again because we realize that it's not going to be that simple. If I summarize the 3 phases of this crisis that we've been through already, the first step is the urgency phase. We have to accept reality as it is. We have to act quickly to shelter, put ourselves and protect ourselves and others. The second phase was the slowing down phase. Some have been locked down literally. Others had to slow down the business. Some businesses, though, were in overactivity because there was more demand for them. In fact, they had to do more, but in a different way. Most companies had to reorganize the way they were working. People working from home or people not working at all. Stores shut down, businesses, still active or less active. But in any cases, you have to check in, listen, understand what's happening. And for most of you, or most of us, it was an opportunity to reinforce relationship, reconnect with people we know, with people we do business with our employees, with our customers, with our suppliers, to try to understand what's going on, what's happening at their end. And that was, what I call the second phase. Now, the third phase is businesses restarting. And it's a big question mark. What's going to happen? How are we going to redo business? Is it going to be like before, different, and in what way? And this is what we'll be mostly trying to focus on to prepare for the best, restart. The causes of slowdown actually were different from one business to another, from one country to another, from one sector or one industry to another. For some businesses, it was simply administrative decision, shut down. You can no longer do business. For others, it was the supply chain that is not working anymore. You cannot, have your products shipped, or for one reason or another, the business will be impacted because the supply chain will not function as usual. For most others, it's the customer behavior. Customers will not, behave or want to buy or do business in the same way. But I just want to point out that some businesses had already some kind of problems before the crisis. It was for some of them a blessing to have this kind of slowdown because it's an opportunity for them to reflect. But let's keep in mind and not forget that the crisis itself would not solve problems that had started before. And this is something that a number of businesses actually would suffer from if they don't realize or make that distinction between what is due to that epidemic crisis and what were the underlying problems that they had to fix or still have to fix for their company actually to restart and be successful again. How will the business pick up? In different ways. For some, it will be just getting back to what it was before. So maybe not very common or not the most common way to restart, but it's going to happen. Some businesses will get back very quickly to the level they were at before. For others, it will be progressive, linear. Some will have to experience this, bumpy up and down. Why? Because every week, from one week to another, the situation will change and they will have to adapt. Things will get better in a certain way. They will find alternatives, in their supply chain to what they used to do in the past. But it might not be reliable. It might not be in the same continuum. And, it will be up and down, but the trend will be going up. And unfortunately, some businesses will suffer, and we have to, prepare for some hard situations for some of the businesses, which in my opinion is not, unavoidable, but let's be aware, not be always over optimistic. Entrepreneurs tend to be very optimistic, and it's a great thing. But optimism, but anticipating and doing the right thing is definitely what needs to be what I recommend, we do. I have time for questions, but if you have, I will take a minute to run just a quick survey by you. Any questions at this stage? Or any comments if you want to share anything? No questions? I'm always surprised when there are no questions. I tend to think that everything was super clear. Okay, are you ready for it's just a simple question. Who's heard about, effectuation? Let me put the survey, and here we go. How much do you know about effectuation? We have 17 answers, 18, quite a few have not replied yet. $20. Okay, ready? Shall we stop? Okay. You should be able to see the results. Okay, so most of you have not heard about effectuation. Only one person has read an article about it. Anything, I mean, it's anonymous, so we don't know who that person is, but I'm glad that, you'll probably learn about something so simple, widespread. Effectuation is the kind of natural way for entrepreneurs to do business or to start a business. It was just described, not invented, by an Indian woman, Sarah Saraswati. She's a professor at Darden University, Virginia. And she just described the way she had observed from her entourage when she grew up in India, how entrepreneurs in her family or around her had started and were running their businesses. And then she started interviewing other people from all over the world, entrepreneurs, to try to understand how they started and how they launched their businesses. And she found out that it was so common, and that was probably the most common way of being in business, of running a business when you're an entrepreneur. So I'm going to share my screen again and walk you through the principles of effectuation. What is this effectuation model about? Let's take a metaphor, an example. If you want to make a dinner party, there are two ways of preparing for it. What is known as the causal way, which is the opposite of effectuation, is the predictable way. You start by choosing a cookbook, you pick a recipe, then you draw it into a shopping list. You try to find the budget and the ingredients. Of course, then you have to follow what's in the recipe. Then you go back home and you prepare the meal, and hopefully you have a great dinner that day. Now, the chances that it happens that way is relatively tiny. The effectual way of doing it, you just start by looking in your fridge, and it's all about what you have in your fridge, whom you know. Basically, you call your friends, you invite them to prepare with you. There will be co-preparing, co-cooking. And if there is an ingredient missing, they will probably bring it with them. And the chances that you have a great dinner party is pretty much 100% on that same day. So this is the illustration of what effectuation is about. Now, of course, in real life, the two models coexist. It's not like one or the other. In the causal way, we tend to start by setting an objective, and then we define the expected returns. We distribute roles. We ask people to do whatever is supposed to be done. And by doing so, we try to, as much as possible, to avoid surprises. And whenever problems occur, we dedicate time and energy to solve those problems. The effectual way, in fact, you don't start by the objectives. You start with your means, what you have, basically. And then instead of thinking, how much will I gain? You just think about how much can I afford to lose? Basically, your line of thinking, the mindset of the effectual way is just to think, how much can I afford? What would I lose if I tried this or that? And of course, you engage others to co-construct with you, and it's all about leadership. Leadership, you cannot be a leader if you don't have followers. So it's all about attracting others to come and co-construct with you. And then, of course, you will have surprises, bad surprises. It's all about leveraging those bad surprises. And because you are in control of what you're doing, basically you will be making your own future. So this is the difference between the two. In the first one, you start with defining objectives and then you try to find the means. With the second one, the effectual way, you start with the means you have and you make the best you can with the means you have, and that will become your objective, which can only always be attained because you do the best with what you already have. In a world of certainty, of course, the causal way works well because you will get there sometime tomorrow. In a world of uncertainty, effectuation is much more critical because it's all about here and now. So the question is not about, whether we're gonna eat tonight, but what are we going to eat tonight? So it's not even an option. If you look at what you lived maybe in the last couple of months, nobody questioned whether you would be eating. I mean, of course, some people suffered and didn't have everything they wanted, but we always find a way to have that dinner and to make that dinner with whatever we have. And business is pretty much the same thing. How can we get the best or make the best of what we already have, in the business? The 5 principles, just to summarize them again, as Saraswati presented them. The first one is the bird in hand. So start with who you are, what you know and whom you know, and do not determine, don't start with preset goals. The second principle, the affordable loss. Look at the downside, not the upside. So invest whatever you can afford to lose without it changing your life, and don't focus on the expected returns. The co-creation, she called it the crazy quilt. Those ladies getting together, they would bring their pieces of fabric and they don't know exactly what's and they will end up making, but they will make something out of it. So build a network of volunteers, self-selected stakeholders who would be your first followers. They would engage, and you will make whatever you think is good and right. And the recommendation here is don't waste time with your competitive analysis, how to do it in a different way. Just do the best you can with whomever you can attract to your business. The lemonade principle, they say, if life throws lemons at you, just make lemonade. So embrace and leverage surprises. Each problem is in itself an opportunity. This is, again, how your mindset as an entrepreneur should be. Don't be discouraged with problems. It's the opposite. Whatever, bad surprise can be turned into an opportunity. So don't be obsessed, by trying to avoid or anticipating the way to problems and try to avoid them, but embrace them, take them as long as they happen, and constantly look for opportunities to turn them into something good to your advantage. The last one is what you call the word view. You are in control of your own environment. Basically, start a business that would be compatible with your natural ecosystem. In other words, don't try to teach a bird how to swim or a fish how to fly, but try to reshape, reframe, and make your business in a way that would adapt to your natural environment. So you'll be shaping and making your own future instead of complaining that whatever is around you is not suited or not the right place for your idea to be successful. It's the opposite. Just be wherever your natural ecosystem is and shape your business so that you are in control of your future and you will be making your own future. And don't get discouraged by common beliefs that this is possible, this is feasible, or this is not. 5 principles and time for questions. Ben cannot. Sorry.
Yeah, Joe, thanks for the presentation again. Maybe a quick question as to, or maybe 2 quick questions as to why, this model is more effective in a rebound period as opposed to a crisis period or a BAU period. And the second question is, how would you reconcile the 2 model in that period? Like, I'm just trying to apply your models to what we've witnessed over the past few weeks, and I don't intend to, recreate a medical discussion here, but you could see the 2 different approaches could apply to the different avenues that some doctors, explored, whether it's used old molecules through hydroxychloroquine and deal with the consequences as they learn forward, or be more conservative and work already to a causal path towards a vaccine, while limited downside death.
Okay, the second question is very, I think, challenging and maybe also sensitive today. But let me answer the first one, and you'll see more in my presentation about the first one. Why is it better to use effectuation? Because if you just determine your objectives and try to find all the means you need, we are in such an unpredictable situation today. The environment is so uncertain that the chances that you get exactly what you want timely, okay, and make whatever we usually do, because there is a lead time before we get to that future. Okay, it's such an uncertain environment that you cannot expect everything to work like normally, the way we used to have things or to see things happening. So basically, if you want to remain in business and be in business and keep in business every day, every single day, every week, and maybe month after month, you will have to get the best out of what you have, within reach, handy. Okay. Not many businesses are equipped, or I would say not many thinkers or leaders or managers are wired to function in such conditions. So if you have that ability, it's definitely going to be a competitive edge. And if you don't have exactly what's in the recipe book to be able to improvise and make something great, with whatever you have, handy, that's definitely going to be a factor for success. I will elaborate more on that.
Thank you.
Any other question?
I have a question. Oh, go ahead.
So can you explain a bit more on the co-creation / network? Why you're saying forget about the competitor analysis?
Okay, for 2 reasons. First, I'm a big fan of blue ocean strategy, which in fact, what it tells you is that if you really focus on your customers and you make whatever your customers want, you make the competition obsolete. So don't waste time trying to understand the competition. If you're connecting with your customers, you have a business, right? And the co-construction principle, if you invite your clients, your strategic partners, but it also applies to your employees to co-build, basically to build a solution together with you, you have a business. It might be small, it might be bigger, but it is certain that you will be in business in a way or another, which does not stop you, means it's not forbidden to sometimes anticipate and make something with the hope that it will find its market. But if you want to focus on certainty, if you invite everybody around the table, with the metaphor of the dinner, you have your friends over, well, everybody's going to be happy because they understand why we have this and not, another menu, because they contributed. They would understand the challenges and the difficulties, and their level of acceptance or tolerance will be, definitely not comparable to something that you would try to force on them or convince them to buy if they don't, badly need it. So those are the two main reasons why it works better that way.
Great, thank you.
Farah, you had another question? Your microphone? Yeah.
Later is fine. I can ask it later.
Another question, comment? Okay, so let me go to the third part of the presentation. And before I go to the way to apply it, just to make sure I share with you the references. Sarah Saraswati, she wrote those two books on effectuation, effectual entrepreneurship. They're more academic, I would say, than practical. Philippe Silverzan, who is a close friend with his PhD at INSEAD, he's now a professor at EM Lyon. He adapted the book into French with the same title, Effectuation. We're kind of very close, and you'll get my video, and there's a presentation, video about Philippe Silverzan presenting Effectuation, at a conference that we organized together. So if you want to read more, learn more, and read about examples, you'll find there a lot of references. So now, in practice, how would we apply those principles, to prepare for the rebound? Three different, I would say, steps to prepare for it. The first one, I call it the inventory assessment. Basically, if you want to know what's in your fridge, there is a process that many companies, or most companies actually, haven't done, because you don't know exactly what you have. Why? Because we're used to thinking products, or we sell finished products. But if you kind of, decompose your product into components, in the same way, instead of selling, gastronomic or full menus, you decline it into ingredients, you will know much better what is the potential that you already have in your business. Basically, this is a list of assets that every company has in one way or another. It could be in people, it could be in machines, it could be in equipment, it could be in their connections and the networks. But that exercise, very few companies would have done it or would be aware of how much they know or how much they have. So basically, the way to do it, you can brainstorm with your team, deconstruct literally the enterprise, disaggregate your products to highlight the competencies, the talents, the know-how, the assets, and the resources that you already have. The second phase would be to explore it around you in your ecosystem. And I call them conversations. You need to have conversations with your clients, conversations with your suppliers to understand, what is available, what are the emerging needs, what is their exact situation, what is it that they're struggling with. Analyze your supply chain, try to look for alternatives, have conversation with authorities that will give you an indication of, what would be the new constraints. All this is to highlight the concerns, the struggles, the new needs, the new problems. Each of them might become a business opportunity or an opportunity for you to adapt your business, so to address them in the best possible way. Try to understand their levels of activity, whether they're strategic partners or suppliers or other businesses similar to yours around. So that would help you kind of shape or understand what are their projects and what is their vision in order to adapt yours. And in the process, the one basic, very critical and important rule, you should not be selling, but if you show that you really care and you offer help, that would lead or generate a number of business opportunities. So to have a good conversation, most people actually don't really understand what a good conversation is about. But a good conversation is about, open-ended question. Be curious about the person you're talking to. Active listening. This is something that some people are much better at than others. But do engage and try to listen and understand. You have also to be authentic and show empathy. Why? Because you want people to tell you, their secrets, or to share with you information that they won't share with anybody, just the general public. And you have to also show some vulnerability. Why? Because when we go with that overconfidence and start those conversations with that mindset that says, I have an answer to any question, I have a solution to any problem, probably, most likely people would not open up and want to, co-construct or contribute to help you find a solution that will be good for your business to do with them. They will tend to challenge you, okay, and oppose actually the idea that you're good at everything, you can find a solution to all problems. So the combination actually makes something that requires a talent. And so it's easy to understand, but not that simple to practice. So not everybody is really good at having those, good conversation. And if you want to, know more or learn more about what good conversation are about, there is a good, TED talk from John O'Leary. You have a couple of books. I'm going to, insist on how to prepare for a good, authentic, open conversation that will get you and the person you're talking to engage into something meaningful, sincere, and I would say more intimate. So you get a competitive advantage versus others because you will know more, you will be exposed to more information with which you can probably compose or which you can use to come up with much better ideas, much more suited and adapted solution if you're talking to clients, or a better deal if you're talking to suppliers. The second step is to engage them and co-construct with them. And to obtain that kind of engagement and commitment, okay, we mentioned the conversation. You start by asking questions, help them express a need, okay, and highlight their needs. Make sure that you ask them for validation and confirmation, okay? Do not try to guess and anticipate too much, okay? It's very important to get their confirmation about the importance of the problem and the relevance of the problem or the potential solution that you can imagine with them. And always suggest to explore together. And the togetherness actually is the kind of, it's what guarantees that you won't be just going that extra mile alone and then finding yourself struggling with selling or convincing them that this is the right way. The more you do it together, the more you will have that alignment from the beginning. So once again, don't try to convince, okay? Let them get convinced that this is the way. Always offer help. This is what will guarantee engagement. And of course, the more you try to explain, the more you will be challenged. Try to involve them. So instead of explaining, just involve. And that can be, very easily explained by understanding that in each of us, we have two different parts of the brain or two different personas. One is what I call Mr. Rational, okay? Basically, those are the people who would want to assess everything before they buy. They base their decision on facts. But there is always this Mr. Intuitive, which is more driven by emotions. This is the intuition. It happens so often that people will tell you, I sense that there is something to be done here, but I cannot tell exactly what. So this is where, the kind of point you want to start with. You want to make them feel that there is something interesting to be done, and then you co-construct with them instead of showing them the full-fledged solution and get it challenged by their checklist. Okay, so the first one, of course, it's easy when you have your rationality. It works when we have less than 5 criteria for your choices, and for more complex situations, when we have obviously more than 10 criteria behind that choice, then it's impossible. And intuition is that kind of advanced, sophisticated intelligence that people would use. And obviously entrepreneurs, when you have the freedom to decide or the liberty of choice, this is what most entrepreneurs would be using. Intuition as an intelligence. And it proved to be a very sophisticated manner to take decisions. So the magic question to ask when you're talking to any of those strategic partners is, what initiative can we launch together now? So the togetherness and the now are very important. It's not like, come back to me when you have a full-fledged solution and it might be in 6 months. So what is the initiative that we can launch together now? And that should lead to the beginning of that co-construction, as I call it. So let the new offers emerge. Those are the solutions to the identified problems. On one hand, you have listed your resources, your know-how, and your competencies. On the other, they would have expressed or become aware of some needs, demand, and maybe new specs. And it's a matchmaking exercise. And then both parties would put their resources on the table in terms of means you have, people, equipment, networks, contacts, reach or access to whatever is required. And by sharing those resources, you can co-construct or co-build the new solution. So the co-production can follow any method you want. Most of you would be familiar with the agile method. I'm not going to elaborate on it. You know what it is about. Or you might want to follow the blue ocean method, which is, what do I need to eliminate, reduce, or do more of, or create that does not exist yet? And okay, that would get you to be in a new category, whatever. The essence here is that you have to be adaptive and creative at the same time. If I get to the third part, okay, we have to plan in a super volatile environment. Okay. What we'll have to do is to assess pretty much week after week, or maybe day after day, the availability and the nature and the shape of so many different parameters. This slide is like overwhelming, but don't get scared. Basically, what it says is that the type of activity that we'll be conducting or doing can be identical to what it was before. It could be an evolution to what we used to do in the past, or maybe totally different. Same thing for the products or services. Are they the same or totally new? The business model, is it similar? Is it different? Clients, do we have the same clients or totally different clients, or a mix of new and old clients? The supply chain, is it, are my suppliers available, reliable? Do they have their products available in a timely manner? What are the other constraints in terms of safety, in terms of legal, human resources? Are people willing to work on site, working from home? Are they available or not available? Access to offices and so on. So all those criteria we'll have to integrate and kind of assess week after week, and the business will have to adapt to that super volatile environment. So if we try to imagine how will the planning or the distribution of work go, in fact, we'll have to start with whatever we have available, the qualification, as I said, the know-how, and the equipment and the availability of the ingredients or whatever. Come up with a list of tasks. This is what I define at the company level. So those are the required roles and responsibility. But because not everybody would be available as it was the case in the past, the action plan, which is at the individual level, what each person will be doing, which defines their mission and the job, will have to adapt to the new needs, and will have to adapt also to who's available. So it's definitely not what you will see on an organization chart. You will have to put together a new system with a tracking system and dashboard that will assess what's the environment like, what is the ecosystem and the supply chain like, and within the company, who's there, who's not there, and what is it that we can do with the, the people, their know-how and their skills. We need a new indicators of progress, okay, in terms of building, offering, customer satisfaction, understanding really what's going on. And we have to come up with different performance indicators, certainly different than the one we had before. And that feedback loop will feed into redefining the new competencies we have, the availability, the new list of tasks, and the distribution of the action plan. Okay, pretty much, very dynamically. And we'll have to repeat that exercise whenever, a new parameter changes or something new emerges. So, and keep in mind the performance is a factor of two things. We, of course, need to consider the potential that we have, but in most cases, the performance is not at the level of the, the best potential, because there are interferences. And in most cases, interferences come from within, because we have procedures, we have routines that maybe used to make sense in the past, but no longer now. Same thing for the decision-making process, centralized or decentralized. How much autonomy do you give to people who have access to information and maybe the intelligence to come up with something suited in their local environment or around them, but not necessarily in a central manner for the whole company and the whole business. So that decision-making process needs also to be adapted. So interference would probably reduce the performance as compared to the maximum potential that we might have. How to allocate taxes? I'll finish with that other metaphor, simple or maybe simplistic, but I like to use examples from basic real world that everybody would understand. Just think the family reunion. And I can imagine people saying, oh no, Joe, don't do that to us. But in that typical family reunion, you're getting together for Thanksgiving, long weekend. Okay, of course, we have to identify what needs to be done, and at some point, you have to distribute the tasks on ideally a voluntary basis, because nobody wants to be forced to do anything. So it's not necessarily the best people at every single thing who would do those tasks, but somehow everything gets done in one way or another. Okay. Is everybody happy? Yeah. In order for it to work well, we need to respect two main principles, two main rules. It has to be fair. So a fair process would certainly, give you a better acceptance and make sure that everybody's going to be happy with the whole experience. And of course, as a family, we need to do it in a way that would respect the values for the family, of the family. So ethical, respecting the core values. And this is exactly what I recommend for any business. Make sure that in whichever way you restructure the work, you follow a fair process. And no matter how you delegate in terms of responsibilities, decision-making, or give autonomy in the way business is done, if your employees, if everybody really understand what are the values of the company and why we do what we do and what is acceptable, what is not, things will work definitely much better. And the company would be much more successful and very reactive. I guess here is my summary. Step number one, reassess the situation, make your inventory, what's in your fridge. Don't forget that people have multiple talents. So the know-how is not necessarily the one thing they used to do in the past, but most people have more than one talent and they're good at much more than you might imagine. make sure you understand what your clients and suppliers need and what is the situation of the supply chain and its alternative. Engage in a process of co-construction. This is the best way to elaborate new offers and make sure that there is demand for them. And co-produce, people will be building together with you. And reorganize the work in the way I described, redistribute the tasks, make sure you redesign the organization, but keep it dynamic. And it's always an opportunity to build new partnerships, either within the business if you had different divisions, or with your ecosystem outside the business. For the first one, you need to keep monitoring what's happening. In order to co-construct, it definitely helps if you have creativity and imagination, but with some wisdom, of course. And the more reactive you are, the more agile and adaptive you can be, the better you will be restructuring or reorganizing the business to address the new demand. A few examples just to illustrate what we've seen. Why would a car company all in a sudden start making ventilators? Okay, and in fact, what they had, handy, not all car manufacturing companies actually had that, but they used the wipers, actually motors, to make those ventilators. In the same logic, okay, some companies started making face masks. Of course, everybody's making face masks now, but initially, even luxury companies like LVMH, try to find a way to address a new need. It's not part of their strategy, obviously not, but they adapted in such a way, looking at their ingredients, the know-how they had, and the equipment, and used it to address a specific demand that was already there. They didn't have to go and market it or sell it, is a way to adapt. Okay, those are probably very visible examples of big companies, but I'm sure that around you, you have so many of them for smaller businesses, and entrepreneurs are actually always, not only in crisis situations, okay, the kind of street smart who would find something, adapt and address a need, basically sell something they don't have or they don't already have, and make sure that they can make it in time to deliver, to keep their customers happy. And here we are for another set of questions. Or maybe feedback. How was it so far?
Hi, Joe. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Nick.
It's very useful for me so far because I'm helping two companies in two different countries for their rebound. One is a manufacturing company in Tunisia, and the other one is a big wellness center in New York. And the principle that you outlay are right on point with what, the way these people need to go about dealing with a rebound, and especially, cooking in the kitchen and preparing dinner with a lot of, uncertainty. We don't know who the guests are going to be. And we don't know who the cooks are going to be. And so I really like this approach.
Thank you, Nick. Any question?
Not at this point on my end. No, it's pretty clear.
Any other question, comment, story to share?
I guess I'll ask my question from before, Joe. At the very beginning, you were talking about the different stages, and I think the second one you'd said was sort of identifying affordable loss. Could you just expand on sort of what that discussion might result in? Is it something as straightforward as financial loss or a number of customers, or are there other examples that we might not think about that we should be thinking about for that type of conversation?
What is your affordable loss? Is that your question?
Yeah, are there other dimensions other than, say, customers or financial that we should be thinking about
Well,
during
it's
that
mostly
discussion?
for entrepreneurs, it's your time. Let's assume you're starting a business or you want to try something new or different. It will consume your resources. And resources can be either money or time. But if I rephrase the question in a different way, in most businesses or whenever we're exploring new solutions, okay, we spend probably more time trying to ask the question like, why should we do this or why should we do that? If you think with the mindset or in a mind frame of affordable loss, the question should be like, why not? What would happen if we tried this for a while? And the why not question will determine your affordable loss. What would I lose if I tried this? If I can dedicate a couple of hours, I can dedicate a couple of days, I can use whatever unutilized capacity for something. So if you think along why not, instead of why and trying to find all the arguments, why should we be doing something, that would open up in an avenue for so many more opportunities. Does it answer your question?
Yep, thank you.
So basically, I could have said, think why not instead of why. And so many companies actually would want a demonstration with those expected returns. Okay, if we did this, how much will we gain? What is the ROI? And it's super hard to determine what the ROI would be. And that's why we don't try a number of things that could be either beneficial. But if you make sure that whatever you try is not going to kill the company, or in other words, it's not going to change your life or impact negatively your life, you can only test and check what the upside would be like. I see Chris wanting to share something.
I mean, as an example of that, my wife had to jump off the call, but she's we run like an in-house daycare that she runs, and we shut down when the school shut down in New York. We're now actively getting ready to come back, but with like distance restrictions, things like that, we had to literally kick the kids out of their room, and we have another unit that we literally just knocked the wall down to yesterday. So we had the discussion probably 2 weeks ago, like, can we go without having, there wasn't a tenant in it from before, can we go without having rent in it while moving the kids upstairs in order to effectively, get extra kids into the school? I mean, it's a very real conversation.
So in fact, effectuation, I think Saraswati has the merit of having invented that name, but it's really common practice. It's common sense and such widely practiced, I would say globally, all over the world. This is the most natural, maybe simple way of doing business for most entrepreneurs. The other one is probably more artificial because it came after a challenge. You have to get your idea validated by somebody else or ask someone else to put resources. And that would definitely limit or distort the way we do things. The more you tend to think how you do things naturally. In fact, somebody actually mentioned that if you look at yourself, as a smart being, the way we think, decide, and do things over weekends, actually outside work, is much closer to effectuation than what we do at work. And it's actually definitely, it makes a lot more sense to keep thinking that way because you can accomplish so much more. Okay. Well, time flies. I see we have still a couple of minutes left. Maybe room for one more question or comment. Ben?
Joe,
fine.
if there are no other questions, did you want to just give a sort of 30-second blurb? We're going to try and do a part 2 to this discussion. Maybe just chat about what that webinar will be about.
So the follow-up, the natural follow-up for that session is about leadership. Because once we know what needs to be done or what we wish to do, it takes to have a certain type of leadership. So the second part, which we're planning for maybe a couple of weeks from now, would be about what type of leadership to get out of the crisis and really master the rebound. Because we think, we mostly think that, you know, a good leader is a visionary. And of course it is the case. But if you look at the situation today with that super volatility and uncertainty, how much can we guess about the future? So we need visionaries, but it's not the most, I would say, important feature that we need from leaders today. So the second part would be about understanding what kind of leadership and how to, you know, live it in practice. I'm personally a big fan of trust and track leadership. If you have heard about before, it's pretty much like effectuation, something that we do very naturally when we do not want to be in command and control. And so then part 2 would be about what kind of leadership and maybe a more detailed presentation about trust and track.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for taking the time. I hope you enjoyed it. And a special thank to Farah, who organized all this, the INSEAD Alumni Association. And I'll say, see you for the second part.
See you soon.
Bye for now.
Thank you, Joe.
Bye. Thank